New Zealand is a wet, whiny country at the bottom of the world. We need a Labour government that will get New Zealand back to work. We will be focused on jobs, on health, on homes, on real action on the cost of living.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's so nice when the other side keep clapping every time I stand up. It's wonderful. And I would say to Chris Hipkins, well, if you're going to do all these things, mate, then how come you didn't do it in the 6 years you were there? Instead, you left us with an utter mess, borrowing money for New Zealanders to pay so that New Zealanders now paying interest every single year that is more than corrections, police and defence and our fire service all together because of him and his former government. I do want to say, though, it is an amazing week when we have basically peace has broken out in the Middle East. Thank you, Mr. Trump, President Trump. And at the same time, war has broken out in the Te Pāti Māori. So perhaps they should get President Trump to come and negotiate for them and be the facilitator. But that's all part of the uni party of Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori. And I think it's also practically a miracle this week. You think it's the Middle East. No. The miracle is the Green Party has actually asked some questions on conservation of the environment. I mean, it's amazing. Amazing. And can I say, not a Gaza flag in sight. I mean, amazing. How does this happen? No tea towels, we say. But I always say, don't talk about tea towels. They don't like being told they wear tea towels. So this is an incredible thing. No tea towels, we say. But I always say, don't talk about tea towels. They don't like being told they wear tea towels. So this is an incredible thing. No tea towels.
5.2 million people residing in the South Pacific with an economy of about 440 billion Kiwi dollars has zero control over the direction or the heat being generated by the Pacific Ocean.
Supplementary. Does he accept the reports finding that climate change is driving significant changes in our oceans? And if so, does he believe that the attempts to drill for more fossil fuels will help or harm our moana?
Well, obviously, Mr. Speaker, our contribution to global emissions is 0.17%, less than 1%. It is the height of conceit to imagine that somehow by closing down New Zealand industry, we're going to save the planet. To suggest that a single minister or a government or 5.2 million people at the distant end of the South Pacific can effect change when larger climate change emitters are doing zero is fanciful.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
With respect to mining fossils, which is what 4 countries are doing, namely China, USA, India and Russia, and contributing to 60% of the emissions, what hope have we got to change that?
Speaker, the hope is we will dig our own coal up, starting with 200,000+ tonnes to reduce our reliance on imported Indonesian coal. The hope is, with the $200 million allocated in the budget, sir, we will accelerate the development of the oil and gas industry. But any suggestion that we're going to hollow out industry, including fisheries, to meet this dreamlike conception of how dangerous climate change is, it's never going to be agreed to by this minister.
Mr. Speaker, if you want to see what happens when ideology trumps competence, when virtue signalling replaces governing and when chaos becomes policy, then look no further than the unholy alliance of the Labour, Greens, Te Pāti Māori. Let's take a tour of the unholy alliance, shall we? We'll start with the Te Pāti Māori, who've just had their reset. They thought they were doing a 180, but somehow they've turned a 180 into a 360. They don't even know basic maths. Mr. Speaker, they were doing a burnout, that's right. Lasting a whopping 3 minutes, their so-called reset was completely shut down from questions, started a half an hour late, and now they've got leaking members leaking against each other. with emails being fired off, making accusations. Mr. Speaker, that's Chris Hipkins' coalition party right there. That's Chris Hipkins' coalition party right there. And let's talk about Chris Hipkins, because he's got his own problems. The ship with no rudder, the ship with no rudder. When he's asked about the Te Pāti Maori and whether he will rule them in or out, what does he say? Well, I'm not sure exactly how many Te Pāti Maoris there are. Well, either that man doesn't know how to count, being a former Minister of Education, or quite simply, Mr. Hipkins is so committed to trying to do a deal that he'll do anything to try to get into government. That shows how desperate that man is. This is the same Chris Hipkins who said he'll work with anyone, if it means a sniff of the Treasury benches. Principles, well, they're optional. Standards, negotiable. Coherent partners, who cares? But let's get to the Green Party, shall we? Because we've got the unholy coalition of chaos on the other side, of course, relies on the Green Parties. And what have we seen from them? For the first time in 2 years, we had a question about the environment. It's like they've just remembered that they're actually called the Green Party. You could have thought, well, for the last few months, pontificating about Palestine, making sure they were chaining themselves to every protest out there with their selective outrage, but not one single word when it comes to the hostages who were released yesterday. The 20 hostages released yesterday. On this side of the House, we're grateful for the work done by President Trump and the coalition of nations to release those hostages, to have a ceasefire in the Middle East. But the selective outrage over there has shown that actually there's nothing but silence. And it all comes back to Chris Hipkins with his unholy trinity, the three parties, which he is desperate, of course, to try to stitch together. And of course, what do we know that this Chris Hipkins will have to do if he's going to try to get elected? There's three things which they are united on. They might not know how to do a reset. They might not quite understand whether their name's the Green Party and what that means they should focus on. But there's one thing that they're all united on, and that, of course, is increased taxes. Increased taxes for New Zealanders. Whether it's a savings tax, whether it's a property tax, whether it's a death tax, that New Zealanders can be guaranteed that behind the scenes, that's what they're cooking up to take to the next election.
New Zealand is a wet, whiny country at the bottom of the world. We will be focused on jobs, on health, on homes, on real action on the cost of living.
What's more important to his government? Protecting the ability for the industry to harvest the last remaining orange roughy, or protecting the integrity of our vulnerable marine ecosystems?
It's actually about helping New Zealanders get ahead by lifting the collective living standards of all Kiwis. That's what our government's focused on. That's why we see huge potential in aquaculture. We want to see it continue to grow very, very strongly like the rest of our primary industries.